Well, we made it to Friday. You know what that means. It's time for the mailbag here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you this morning, doing what we do every Friday, taking your questions from the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and answering as many as we can right here in the mailbag. You have questions about Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, transfers, anything else on your mind. We take them all and we answer, like I say, as many as we can. We don't always get through all of them. We actually have a couple left over from last week that we'll start with before we jump into this week's questions. But we get as many as we can. We do as many as we can. And then we send you on your way. So let's jump into it. The Morning Pit Mailbag for this week here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's a mailbag edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like I said, I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com. It's a Pitt site on the 247 Sports Network where we cover Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We cover it right there at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where you can hang out with other Pitt fans all day, every day, and talk about Pitt sports on the message boards. Panther-Lair.com. I think it's the best community of Pitt sports fans you are going to find, and they're all right there at Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, our YouTube channel right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where you can get all of our Pitt video content. We have these daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, where we talk a little bit of Pitt sports to get your day started. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com, we hang out. We talk to you. You get in the chat screen over there on the right. We have a little back and forth. People post comments on these videos, on our Morning Pit videos, and every now and then, sometimes we'll reply. We'll get into a little engagement there, but not as much as we do during the live stream. During the live stream, you can post all your comments over there, and we'll interact with it in real time. Your comments and questions. We'll answer your questions. We'll react to your comments, and it's a lot more fun to do that. Now, this week, we had to switch the schedule up and move it from Wednesday to Tuesday due to some scheduling conflicts. That's all right. That was a youth baseball game that we had on Wednesday night. We won, so shout out to us. We scored like 4 runs in the top of the 6th, I think, which is the final inning. Come back, we were down 8-7. We came back and won 11-8, so good for us. Anyway, when that happens, when there's something else going on Wednesday night, we have to switch days. We have to go on Tuesday or Thursday or whatever we might do it. Maybe we'll do it on Wednesday morning, whatever it might be. The best way to make sure you don't miss the live stream or miss any of those schedule changes is to subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you do that, you can turn on notifications. And if you do that, you'll get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live. So subscribe button's right down there. It's somewhere around where I'm pointing. Click that subscribe button. You can turn on notifications, and then you'll know every time we post something new at Panther-Lair at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, a couple questions left over from last week. I'm going to start off with Panther Bandy. We'll get us started. Says, will Pat Narduzzi make it to the playoff before his time as head coach at Pitt ends? And if so, has the quarterback that will do it been identified as either on the roster or committed to a future class? Well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to totally cop out on this question and say that, look, right now 12 teams make the playoff, right? Out of 60-some Power 4 teams, however many it is. Out of 130-some FBS teams, there's 12 teams that make the playoff. Even if you increase it to 16, it's still a fraction, a small fraction of the total teams in college football. I think you would probably, if you looked at the sport of college football, if you looked at FBS, you would say, what number would you pick of teams that realistically, year in, year out, or 2 out of every 3 years, 2 out of every 4 years, 3 out of every 5, whatever it might be, should realistically expect to make the playoff? I think every year you're going to have a handful of teams that are a bit of a surprise. Indiana, SMU. In the past, when it was a 4-team playoff, I think we saw Michigan State make the playoffs. We saw TCU make the playoffs. We saw Washington make the playoffs. These are these sort of outlier schools. And every year there's going to be a couple of outlier schools. But, in a 12-team playoff, probably at least 8 and as many as 10 teams are going to be teams that you probably would have expected to be there. The teams in the top half of the SEC, the teams in the top half of the Big Ten. That's the reality, is you're going to expect those top teams to be there. And there's probably 2 to 4 spots each year in a 12-team playoff. Maybe you add 1 or 2 if it's a 16-team playoff. But there's, in a 12-team field, there's 2 to 4 spots that are going to go to those kind of outlier schools. And And so what you're talking about is what are Pitt's chances of being one of those 2 to 4 teams in any given year at some point over the next, let's say, 5 years. I don't know how long Pat Narduzzi's time at Pitt is going to be. We know his contract runs through 2030, but realistically, how long is he? Let's just call it 5 years. What are the chances of Pitt being one of those 2 to 4 teams over the next 5 years? I would say they're slim, not necessarily as a slight on Pitt, but because any team, when we're talking about, if there's 130 FBS teams, we're talking about, at most 20 of them would not fit into the category of sort of outlier schools if they made the playoffs. There's maybe 20 that probably, or maybe less, that annually would enter the season with the expectation to make the playoffs, with the realistic and understandable expectation of making the playoffs. So you're talking about 100 to maybe even 115 teams that, if they make the playoff, would probably be considered one of those outliers. They would be, Indiana or SMU from this past year, Boise State, right? Those outlier schools that are not necessarily the blue bloods, right? So you're talking about what are Pitt's chances over the next 5 years of emerging from that pack of 115 teams or 110 teams for one of the 2 to 4 spots if they stick with a 12-team field. And, you just play the odds on that. The odds are slim. Now, that's not to say that the path doesn't exist, right? A 12-team playoff, Pitt makes it in 2021. If they have that season, and that season is conceivable, that season can happen. You need a lot of things to line up, but if you're one of those 100 plus or 110 teams, you do need a lot of things to line up. You do need a lot of things to fall your way. You need the schedule to be right. You need the right collection of talent. You need the right luck with injuries. You need the ball to bounce your way a couple times to get you into that spot. The path is there. In 2021, Pitt is a playoff team in a 12-team playoff field. So it's not impossible. It just takes a lot of things to line up. Everything sort of needs to be almost perfectly aligned for it to happen. Not just for Pitt, but for the vast majority of the schools and teams in the sport. Is the quarterback on the roster then that can do it? I don't know. Right now, Eli Holstein is a redshirt sophomore, right? Mason Heinschel is a true freshman. Angelo Renda is entering his senior year of high school. He's finishing up his junior year of high school, right? So those guys, when Kenny Pickett was a third-year player or a true freshman, prior to his true freshman year, maybe after that Miami game his freshman year, you might have said, yep, that guy's going to get them there. But certainly prior to his freshman year, I don't know if anybody was saying that's a playoff caliber quarterback. So I don't know. It depends on how these guys develop, and then are they going to have a Biletnikoff Award winner at wide receiver? Are they going to have some of these other key elements that came together to make that 2021 season happen? So like I said, I was going to largely cop out on this question, and I think I've done that rather effectively. I think I've talked my way around this. Yes, the path exists. There's a way to do it. What are the chances of it? Not terribly great, but they do exist. The chances do exist. It's just you got to get things to really line up. Now, if the field expands, if it goes from 12 to 16, then okay, maybe you you increase your chances, but still it's to a probably marginal degree. Zenmeister 1992 says, given the new and ever-changing landscape of college athletics, do you think Pitt is better suited to compete now, or were they better suited to compete before all of these changes started taking place? You can take this question however you want, as a whole, or break it down by sport. That's a good question. Because it cuts two ways. If we're talking really about the transfer portal and sort of the impact of NIL on roster management and transfers and all of those things, there's a downside, right? You develop a good player, you scout him out. He was an overlooked guy in high school. You bring him in, you develop him, he turns into something good, and boom, he leaves and transfers to another school. And that's going to happen. But it's going to happen everywhere. Like, that happens to everybody. Everybody loses players that they don't want to lose to the transfer portal. It happens. Now, with if you're a school like Pitt and you're not regularly trafficking in blue chip prospects, then it's going to hurt a little bit more when those guys go. When you're able to find the overlooked prospect and develop him into an All-American or All-Conference player, it's going to sting a little more. So there's that side of it. But that side affects everyone. The flip side is the transfer portal has, for all the belly aching that coaches do about it, the transfer portal has created opportunities to fill holes, address needs, and get better fast. If you could do it right, you can get better fast. And that's true in football, and I think it's doubly true in basketball. I think you can engineer a turnaround quicker in basketball than you've ever been able to in the history of the sport. Because, you could go out and, have a bad season and go recruit 5 McDonald's All-Americans and bring them in and get a turnaround because you got these great freshmen. But, first of all, you got to actually land all those guys. And then second of all, you need all the, that team of freshman superstars to actually go out and live up to the potential in their first year. Now you can have a bad season. You can bring in some good high school kids, but you can go out and get the transfers, experienced veteran players who can come in and help you right now, who can fill the needs, address the holes, and make you better right away, particularly in basketball. But it's true in football too. Man, we were really close. We just didn't have the depth on the offensive line. Well, now you can get the depth on the offensive line. You can get the starters and the depth on the offensive line, which is what Pitt did. Man, our defense was pretty solid. We just didn't have a great pass rush out of the defensive end. Well, you could go get 3 transfers at defensive end to help fill that need and address that need. And so, and this applies to everybody. Everybody is able to do this now. But if you're good at it, if you can evaluate well and project well and develop well, you can succeed in this, new world. And I think, let me check the wording of your question. Is Pitt better suited to compete now, or were they better suited to compete before all of these changes? I think it's a new opportunity that has presented itself now. That wasn't present years ago. And so, again, if you can do it right, this is a way you can really get good fast. Everybody's got that opportunity, but it is a unique opportunity that wasn't present before. So for everybody, everybody should be better suited to compete now than they were 15 years ago, if they can manage the current system properly. All right, get into questions from this week. Smenges starts us off. Which 2 stats on offense do you expect to improve the most in year 2 of Cade Bell as the offensive coordinator? And then I'm going to tie this into Mike Sullivan 2027 also had a question in here. And this is connected enough that I'm going to tie it in. Says, how do you expect Pitt's run game to look in 2025 compared to 2024, especially against tougher defenses, since Pitt had struggles running the ball against West Virginia, SMU, Clemson, and Louisville last season? I talked yesterday a lot about the offense and optimism or skepticism about the offense. And one of the things I talked a lot about was touchdowns, scoring offensive touchdowns. And one of the stats that really stood out to me that I just kind of couldn't believe was that in eight ACC games last year, Pitt scored 6 rushing touchdowns. And for all the excitement around Desmond Reed, deserved excitement, understandable excitement about Desmond Reed, they didn't do much in terms of scoring rushing touchdowns. And, between having a really good running back in Reed, a big quarterback who can run a little bit, and Eli Holstein, I would have thought that, and Daniel Carter, right, that big bruising back that you should be able to use at the goal line, I would have thought they would have been more successful running the ball and scoring rushing touchdowns than they were. And so when I look at where, one of the things I think they need to improve this year, and one of the things I think they'll try to improve this year, it's the rushing offense and scoring rushing touchdowns. I mean, I'm just talking about touchdowns here, but I think the rushing offense overall does need to improve and be more effective, and I think it can improve. A lot of that will be tied to the offensive line. I think a decent amount could be tied to Cade Bell and how he develops his offense and grows his offense and evolves his offense heading into year 2 here at Pitt. But I think they've got to get better with the overall rushing attack. Desmond Reed is really, really good. We know that. I think Joel Goff can be pretty good. The freshmen, I think, can be good. Ja'Karian Turner was one of the stars of spring camp as a true freshman who enrolled in January. And so I think the talent is largely there in the backfield. They need the O-line to block well, and they need Cade Bell to just evolve his understanding of how to, call the run offense, design the run offense, and execute the run offense. So I don't know if it's going to improve. I think it needs to improve. That was Mike Sullivan 2027's question is how do you expect the run game to look in 2025? Smedges asked which two stats on offense you expect to improve the most in year two. I think it would be that. I think the run game would be a big one. And then, just year two, I would think it's tough. I mean, I want to say the consistency in gaining first downs. Cade Bell talked, I think, early in the season last year when they were really good at this, that he wanted to be the number one team in the country in first downs gained, right? That they just want to chip away and keep picking up first downs as they move down the field. That's what they did at Western Carolina. It's what he wanted to do at Pitt. And I think they were doing it through the first half or a little less than half of the season. And then obviously once you run into injuries and things like that, it becomes a bit it gets a little bit tougher, but I think they'll get a little bit better at that. If they can keep guys healthy, I think they can get better at gaining first downs. And that'll be tied a little bit to the run game, of course, because you get those wins on first down. You're going to be set up, better set up to convert and continue the drive and get a fresh set of downs and all of that. So which two stats on offense do I expect the most improvement? I think the run game, just overall effectiveness of the run game, whether it's in yards, total yards, yards per carry, rushing touchdowns, whatever it might be. And then first downs gained. I think you'll see a more consistent effort across 12 games as opposed to just 4 or 5 when they were one of the best teams in the country at gaining first downs. And then obviously over the last 8 games or 7 games, they fell off a bit. Let's see. J-Town Panther Fan 89 says, what is your over-under for commits on June official visits? I haven't gone back and looked at what they got each year from the June official visits, but I think it's probably safe to assume over-under 9.5, probably 8.5, maybe 8.5. I could be convinced to go 8.5, and then when the money comes in heavy on the over, the line would move to 9.5. But I think, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see double digits on the official visit commitments this in June coming up next month. Typically, it tends to be what they do. They get those big official visit hauls. They get big commitment hauls out of the month of June, and I have no reason to think that they won't do it again this year in 2025. All right, one more question here. Pocono Panther says, so far, as of Wednesday, May 14th, nothing yet on Roman Cipa for Pitt hoops. Who is Pitt's competition for him from the colleges? Don't think I've read anything anywhere on this. Thanks for the response. So Roman Cipa, the Australian forward that Pitt is trying to land, a rugby player, a big rugged guy, trying to bring him in to be the power forward. Still seems like Pitt is the favorite here, the most likely school to land him. I have no idea what the competition is. I don't. This is... It's hard enough to cover international prospects, and kind of get a feel for what's going on in those situations. It's been especially tough in this case here with Roman Cipa. I don't know if he's still under the radar, just not getting noticed by colleges enough, or whatever it might be. There's just not a lot floating out there about his recruitment. So I don't know. All I know is it seems like Pitt's still in the driver's seat. He was just named to the U19 national team or something like that. But we still think Pitt will be the favorite to land him. We still think Pitt is the favorite to land him. We still think Pitt will land him. It's just a matter of time in finding out, until he commits and then until he actually gets on campus. I think it feels like there's a lot riding on Pitt getting him as far as what their plans are for the 2025-26 season. And, we keep digging. We keep trying to make those international phone calls and see what we can find out. But it's been tricky. It's been quiet. The most we know at this point is Pitt is involved, and we think Pitt is more or less in the driver's seat. So we'll see. All right, great questions this week. Thanks to everybody who submitted them on Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports news, Panther-Lair.com, and, of course, right here on YouTube. Like and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for watching the video today. Thanks for checking in all week long. It's been a fun week. Lots of good things to talk about. I'm sure we'll have a ton to talk about next week as well. So enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend, and we will catch up with you on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.